Staying on brand with the Made in America podcast, this July 4th highlight episode, we're talking about reshoring. Reshoring to address supply chain issues, to get closer to customers, and to take advantage of our great workforce. Join us as we talk to Connecticut manufacturers who are successfully bringing manufacturing back to the U.S.A. Just a quick reminder for you to like, subscribe, and rate this podcast so we can get your feedback and know how to make it better.
We can strengthen the supply chain from the bottom up. That's going to help grow manufacturing in Connecticut. So, don't look at, the top down is going to happen. They're going to, but having that connection to the leading manufacturers in Connecticut, telling us what they're going to, they see in the future gives us an opportunity, gives me an opportunity as Chief Manufacturing Officer to go back and say, how do I make sure I strengthen the supply chain in every single manufacturer so that we support manufacturing from the bottom up? We have to have that solid foundation. We can't let the little manufacturers out there just hang out there. So
that's really, honestly, Paul, that's like a really interesting thing that hadn't even occurred to me before, which is that some of those larger manufacturers, when they look at what makes Connecticut a good place for them to be, the supply chain is a huge part of that.
Yeah, there's billions of dollars. They're spending billions of dollars in the supply chain in Connecticut. Those large manufacturers. We need to make sure that the smaller manufacturers are strong to make sure that they're supporting that supply chain. We're only as strong as our weakest link in that chain, and we have to make sure that we're continuing to build the supply chain from the bottom up.
I'm seeing components now that we would have written off and said only done overseas. And now I'm seeing them what they're calling reshoring. They're coming back. I was walking around my facility with a machinery dealer about a month ago. We have a really large machine, and it was made in Taiwan. And he said, that machine today would cost $100,000 to ship overseas to get to you. That's just to California. Then we'd have to spend another $30,000 to get it from California to Stratford. And so I said to him, well, it makes a lot of sense for you to open up a manufacturing site, like maybe in Indiana or Connecticut.
Right.
And I think that's doable. I mean, the United States has always paid attention to being competitive. And through technology and practices, management practices, whatever it may be, we can compete.
We're seeing a lot of reshoring. We're seeing a lot of multiple facilities move back to the States. And I think we're going to see some more growth from that in the next couple of years.
What do you think's driving that reshoring?
I do think that, our biggest competitor being China, I think that they've had their share of problems. And I think that, I hear from our customers is that, what once took 30 days on the water is now taking, 6 months to get product. And so, even in the automotive industry, you'll see these you hear about these chip shortages, right? Those are all made by two people, Intel, and I think, I can't remember the other one, but those are all made in China and Taiwan. You're starting to see some of these people now open up facilities in Texas to bring it back to the States because they can't afford to, you see some of these lots, these car lots, right? They're empty. Mm-hmm. And you try to order a car now, it takes 6 or 8 months, right? And so, although the automotive will tell you that they don't like it, they do like it, right? Their mentality before the pandemic was they used to force the cars on the manufacturer, all these all these dealers. Now they like it because they're getting $10,000 over invoice for a car, and they don't have to worry about warranty items sitting in a parking lot. The car's just storing, right?
Right.
So there's it's funny how those things create different opportunities and open people's eyes and companies' eyes to different things that happen.
For many of us, especially people in manufacturing, it does feel like it's a lot more global than it ever was before, and it's probably going to get more so, or maybe not. Yeah. I just wonder your thoughts around sort of competing in a global market, offshoring, reshoring. I'm just curious what you're seeing from your perspective on all that.
I think it's one of the battles that we have here in Connecticut is you'll have companies thinking, well, I can't come to you because you're in expensive Connecticut, so obviously I'm not going to get a low-cost I'm not going to get the global price. I can go to Poland or Singapore and get it a lower price. And what I spent a lot of time convincing them, it's not true. It's all about productivity. So we have highly skilled people here. We have the technology. Yeah, our costs are a little higher, but we're twice as productive. We are. I go to the other factories what I'm talking about, and I see them, and they are very inefficient, compared to what we're doing with the lean and the technology. And so we compete globally all the time. So getting this fallacy from some of the, let's say, larger corporations who think you can't come to Connecticut, it's just not true. You have to go to good companies in Connecticut. And by the way, if you're not good, you're probably gone. So there's good companies in Connecticut that can compete all day long with the competition overseas.
Yeah, listen, I mean, I believe in that concept of sort of, that's why efficiency is so critical. And it's not just in manufacturing, but you referenced something called the global price. And I think the internet, one of the things the internet has done is created sort of a market price that's sort of irrespective of where you are, because someone can just go Google it or Amazon it or whatever, and the price is there. And the same is true in services, it's true in manufacturing. So then this says, okay, the price is the price. So what do I have to do? I got to figure out how can I produce at a level of efficiency that's going to give me enough margin between what I can do and what the global price is. I mean, it's pretty simple.
You described that perfectly. No, seriously, that's exactly right. And getting people to understand that is really important. Yeah.
Yeah, it's huge. And one way to, and to your point, one way to do it is to just look at cutting costs. But long term, that's probably not a winning strategy. Productivity and efficiency and effectiveness is going to be a better strategy long term. And Aero Gear kind of proves that out. I wonder if you could sort of give us your view of American manufacturing. There's lots of talk about onshore, reshoring, the idea of supply chain management. The pandemic, I think, has done, two things, well, a lot of things, but two things relative to this conversation, which is pushed a lot of technology forward, right? We got to work from home. We want to see stuff from home, created adoption there. And it's also caused people to rethink supply chain and bring it closer. And maybe you could opine on what you're seeing in the focus groups and the companies you're talking to, and what you see for that future.
Sure. The industry that I serve is very healthy right now. Backlogs are as large as they've ever been for the owners that I speak to on a daily basis. People are feeling really good about it, feeling really good about growth. And I think that signal and other world forces is causing this, is driving this reshoring. And I think I'm probably going to go out on a limb a little bit here, but reshoring of our manufacturing, and to me, the equation goes like this. Reshoring of our manufacturing is about protecting intellectual property. And protecting this intellectual property is about our national security. It's an imperative. It's not an option. We know, again, watch the news outlets. We know there are bad actors out there. And so what we need to act, every single person has a responsibility to act to protect the intellectual property that this country produces. There are a lot of people that want what we have. We have to protect it. And so I see people building the infrastructure to make sure that they protect, they build those moats around what it is that we do, and do it effectively. I don't know how else to say it. I might have said too much.
No, it's great. I mean, I love it. And I think, listen, I'm seeing a lot of the same stuff, right? I mean, backlogs are up, and I'm just going to rebeat this same drum again, because I think, just because people want to reshore, just because it is good for national security, it's good for the economy, it's good for business to operate, doesn't mean that buy American or do all that. Means we are absolved of having to make our businesses better and more efficient. Do you see this kind of rejiggering and understanding of the world is going to lead to more reshoring of manufacturing, if not moving, some more chip manufacturing back to the U.S., at least having more split manufacturing so we can control our destiny? Because, I mean, to your point about the chips, if they decided, if foreign countries who make chips for us decided to stop sending us new computer chips, that would be a huge problem.
Yeah, and I think that it's that awareness that we may have to pay a bit of a premium, but onshoring is absolutely critical. Also, I believe that it becomes I think Americans are uniquely positioned to like to compete. I think we've had these conversations before. And you look at whether it was World War II or FDR or the challenges with JFK. And you say to yourself, how do we, when we have an adversary, we don't want to lose. And I think that now with this awareness that we aren't necessarily number one, has brought on a sense of vigor across the entire ecosystem that people want to go win and fight and be better in tech, be better in manufacturing, accept the fact that we just can't provide the same sort of solution we've had for years. We need to come up with new, better ways to make things, develop things, design things, field things, and allow ourselves to fail. Fail fast. I know people say it often, but it really is critical.
Stanley and Black & Decker went through in the kind of late 70s, early 80s, the whole migration of moving manufacturing to Asia. Mm-hmm. Low-cost country, get the lowest price possible, and then ship it all back into the United States and into the European markets. That trend has changed a lot in the last decade. And you really need to be much closer to your customers and your end users for a lot of different reasons. What we found out recently is the complexity of the supply chain. Hopefully we're not always going through a pandemic for the rest of our life, but in a pandemic, in this situation, the complexity of the supply chain, of having a long supply chain, is not good.
Yeah.
And so we've gone from a situation now where we bring in certain things from Asia that used to take 30 to 40 days to get from one shore to the other. Now it takes almost 90.
Oh, wow.
And so you're tripling the cost, you're tripling the time, you're tripling the amount of inventory you need because you have to have things on water and in your warehouses. And it's just proved the point of the strategy that we've been executing on for the last 10 years, which is basically bringing back all the manufacturing to the United States or to Europe to serve the European market. And the good news is the timing of that is happening almost perfectly with what's happening in the fourth revolution of manufacturing, or what everyone calls Industry 4.0, with all the technology and the automation. You are going to have a higher labor cost here than you would in Asia. That's okay, though. You just have to figure out how to manufacture differently here. And what's interesting is when we were first embarking on this strategy, everyone was worried about, we're going to displace a bunch of workers, here in the U.S. How are we going to integrate Industry 4.0 and not have people lose jobs? We need to retrain them. And that is true to some extent. But what we're finding is that there's such a need for people/workers in the United States and in Europe that there's not enough people to do the work. So as you're bringing more and more back, you actually have to highly automate things. You have to highly digitize things because you just won't have enough people to do the work if you do it the way that you do it in Asia today.
We should be making sure that those supply chains are all American. Right now, we have more and more of the things that go into a military jet engine or a helicopter or a submarine being produced overseas. The actual final product is assembled in the United States, but the supply chains are increasingly, in Europe or in Asia. We can bring those supply chains back home, and that might be able to counteract some of the private sector decline we will see in demand.
I mean, do you think that that's going to be more of an administrative action, or do you see kind of bringing back your kind of historical initiatives? I mean, I know you introduced bills even as recently as 5 years ago to enhance the Buy American approach from the federal government. Do you think that there's any hope of a Buy American bill kind of going again through Congress? Is that even something that's on the radar? Is it administrative? What do you see in that regard?
Well, so much of it can be done administratively. Right now, if you don't want to if you're assembling a tank and you're buying parts, you do have a requirement to buy all those parts from the United States, but you can apply for waivers. And you have to show that you can't find the part in the United States, or you can't find a part that's sort of within 40% of what you could buy it overseas. Well, the administration, the president, the Department of Defense can be much stricter in how they give out those waivers. Sometimes they don't even check to see if the part actually can be made in the United States. So part of it is administrative, but then part of it is also legislative. I do have legislation that would cut down on the number of waivers. And so I think there's equal parts legislative responsibility and administrative responsibility. This is one of the few areas that I'm able to work with the Trump administration on. They actually, in the White House, do believe in strengthening Buy American laws. The problem is it is just such a dysfunctional White House that they can't seem to sort of actually take the things that they believe in the White House and turn them into action at the Department of Defense. So as much as Trump talks about Buy America, the numbers don't actually suggest that we're buying a lot more parts from American companies.
So what are you seeing from a reshoring and manufacturing growth in America perspective in the coating business?
Certainly seeing it. I mean, so as a coater, we depend on the guys that make the metal or the other products, plastic, wood, whatever have you. There is a pretty decent movement, especially in the last 2-3 years, coming back.
Really?
I have a customer that makes die cast, you look at let's just take Connecticut because, here we are.
That's what we're talking about.
So
yeah.
You look at cities like Bridgeport, Torrington, Waterbury, Hartford. You look at a lot of these buildings that have been dormant since the late 90s, mid 90s, since, NAFTA pulled a lot of work out of here. A lot of businesses left. A lot of companies have closed. So we are seeing things come back. I have a die casting customer that is 24/7. And they are expanding. They just built like an 80,000 square foot facility in Ohio. That's good news to hear, right? Instead of we're slow, we're closing up. They're building up.
Wow.
So I think those that have survived, 2008 was a hard time too. So those that have survived those types of downturns are going to totally take on the uptick, right? The upturn. So that's very important. But we've been very fortunate. I think there's a pretty good network of metal finishers in our area and in the Northeast, and everybody has pretty much maintained. That's great news.
So let's talk a little bit more about the reshoring or nearshoring or onshoring, whatever people want to call it. Like, are you seeing some of that? There's a lot of talk about it, and I've heard about it in pockets. What are you seeing out there? Not just maybe at Altec for sure, but also just through the other, manufacturers that you talk to through SMA and everywhere else.
Yeah, I hear about it all the time. A lot of companies are moving from, Asia to Mexico. Some of them are moving back to the United States. Some of them are just in the evaluation stage. We're getting a lot of quoting activity because they want to know, what is it going to cost me to bring that assembly back from China or Taiwan to the United States? And so we're doing all of that work and trying to help the customers make those decisions.
Do you think that all these inquiries and reviews, do you anticipate that they're going to be successful? And there's a lot of people hoping that they are. Do you have a view on that? I'm
positive about it. I think that we will see some success in that area. A couple of years ago, we started getting work from Mexico. A couple of our customers moved the line from Mexico to Torrington. And so it's natural to think that it's going to continue, and there's even more reason for it to continue now.
Because this all started really pre-pandemic. That was
pre-pandemic.
And I think that's another piece that I think is really interesting to really point out. I think some people feel like, oh, well, everyone thinks everything's going to change from the pandemic. And, a lot of people believe that, but things tend to not change as much as we think in the time. But from what I've seen, I think you're echoing this, is a lot of these trends were already happening unrelated to the pandemic. Maybe that's pushing it a little bit faster in some areas, but reshoring is not something that just started in 2020.
That's true. It has been a slow-moving thing, and we've benefited from that trend. And I think we'll definitely see more of it. I think that there's a lot of growth opportunity for our industry in the United States and in Connecticut.
How do you think about sort of navigating the challenges of doing sort of onshore and offshore work, especially in a scenario where it's not just sort of sell it and forget it, but sell it, maintain it? How do you guys think about managing that?
Yeah, we have a pretty deep perspective on that. So we just to start with, from a supply chain perspective, we are largely U.S. centered. So about 85% of our content comes from the United States, with the balance coming from abroad. So we have taken a very, very careful view at and thoughtful view of how we've grown our supply chain to mitigate global threats and risks, and putting countermeasures to offset that. Local content is an important part of growing business. So we do very, very carefully evaluate supply partners in regions where we look to grow our business, and then deploy localization efforts very, very specifically to help grow that localized content, to help supply chain efficiencies or manufacturing efficiencies, and help grow our business in those regions.
About 5 years ago, we embarked on a strategy of make where we sell and source where we make. And really what that means is that the supply chain should cluster around the customer base.
Got it.
So we opened up a factory in the UK. I don't know when the last time a factory in the UK was opened up, but a few years ago, and people in the UK want to buy a DeWalt drill that says made in the UK with a Union Jack in the box.
Right.
You know, we've opened about 5 plants in the U.S. in the last 5 years. So what we're seeing is that
more kind of micro manufacturing. So my customer's here, let's put a factory nearby and source near there as well.
Exactly. Because, you know, at the end of the day, also, you're seeing great political pressure on the global order, and the global order is becoming decentralized.
Yep.
So people are moving out of China because there's all kinds of unknowns. When they joined the WTO 20 years ago, people thought that capitalism and the political system would collide.
Yeah.
They're actually been an example where they can take a political system and decouple it from an economic system.
Yep.
So you've got really this.
And you think that's put some pressure on not sourcing in China? Is that part of the reshore?
It's unfriendly. The reshoring will happen due to the supply chains will move due to political considerations.
Right.
But the reshoring will happen in advanced manufacturing because the workforce in the United States is nimble enough to relearn, will work with their heads instead of their hands.
Right.
And it'll lift the whole economy because these are high-tech jobs. They're not dull, dirty, and dangerous anymore.
And what do you see? How do you see that impacting Connecticut, that reshoring and the move to the head away from the hands?
Well, Connecticut's in a perfect place because of its legacy, because of its workforce, and its proven ability to manufacture complex things.
Right.
I make submarines and airplanes,
helicopters,
and
airplanes,
Black Hawks, Nighthawks. I mean, you know, this is actually some of the most complicated stuff in the world, some of the most important stuff in the world, and it's done right here. So, I mean, if there's something harder than that,
right,
you know, let me know. But you know, the fuel cell technology. I was with Dr. Radenka Merrick at UConn, and she was talking about the fuel technology to go to the moon was built here in Connecticut.
I think big companies are smartening up. Before they were just looking at the dollars, and I think now they're looking at there's so much more that goes into than just the price. Mm-hmm. And I think they're realizing availability has a number that you can't even measure, right? Mm-hmm. And so availability of product, they quickly realize that when you don't have available product, you can't make any sales, right? And so I think availability to them has become the number one factor besides price. So I think it will stand the test of time. I really do.
There's this broader conversation happening in the American public today about the impact of technology and robotization, right? And you can certainly look at that as a threat to jobs as more processes are being automated. The reality is that has been in many ways a boon to American manufacturing because as you reduce the amount of the product's price attributed to labor, then we are able to better compete with low-cost labor countries like China or Mexico. It still requires people to run the machines. It just still requires people to buy to make the machines. And so I think we need to have policies in this country which incentivize rather than discourage automation of manufacturing, because as much as the global trend may be that those machines will replace labor, in the United States, they will actually they'll actually end up in more manufacturers being able to produce in the United States because labor becomes not as big a portion of the price of the good.
What have you enjoyed the most?
I really love, and this has happened many, many times, people will call up or their email. This happens very frequently. And they're just like, just got my kit. And sometimes they're like, you know, I've been a long-term customer. Other times they're like, oh, I never heard of you, but my buddy has one and he loves it, whatever. And they're like, I just want to thank you for making a great kit and making it in the USA. That's it. That's the phone call or that's the email. And that to me is so rewarding because it is not easy manufacturing in the US. And you know, all of our materials are US made too. It's a sourcing nightmare. I'm not going to lie. And it's frustrating. But when I get phone calls like that and emails like that, it really makes it worth it for me.
Made in America with Ari Santiago is brought to you by Compass MSP.
Thanks for listening and spending some time with me today. My goal is to help build a strong manufacturing community, and it would be impossible to do without all of you.